Welcome to THA Talks, for free thought and open minds. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in, wherever you may be, whenever it may be. It's good for you to join us here on THA Talks. Now, we've not only got a good show for you this evening, but we've got a good project on the table. You're all familiar with Shana Collins, I'm sure, who's done some fantastic interviews with David and I over the last few years, and she's also contributed when we've been away and not been able to contribute as much as we'd liked. And we've spoken in the past about her, and also Stephanie James, who's been on the show to do some great talks on astrology, about those girls setting up something themselves, a side project on the THA website. Now, we've got that off the ground. For now, it's going to be on the THA Talks network, the regular RSS feed, and we're going to roll with it and see how we go and see where that project takes us. But if you remember, in edition 45, we've done an interview with Mary Rodwell. She's a professional counsellor, hypnotherapist, and a ufologist researcher that deals with a lot of abduction and experience cases where people have these alien experiences, and a lot more, very in depth, and a lot of strange stuff that we discussed with Mary then. She's back now with Shana and Stephanie, so we're going to get this Shana and Stephanie show on the road and enjoy.
Okay, so like I was saying, Mary, my name is Shauna, just so you can put a name to the voice. Stephanie and I just started working on a side project from THA Talks to where we're going into some different kind of topics more in depth. And we're really excited to have you join us. Stephanie, did you want to say hi?
Hello, Mary. It's great to meet you finally.
Oh, hello, Stephanie.
So, Mary, I know that you have just recently put out a new book. You're twice the author, have done a couple of documentaries that go into the experiencers of extraterrestrial encounters. But it seems like with your new book, you've kind of shifted your focus to more of an evolutionary process for people and why we're having these interactions with ETs. So maybe we could kind of go into the impetus of your new book and how that kind of process began for you.
Sean, you're absolutely correct. The one thing that I've discovered over the last 20 years is you're constantly looking not only for patterns of, the experiences, because each individual has their own unique way of experiencing encounters with these non-human intelligences. But the other thing is, okay, so why? The big question is, why me? What's it all about? Where is it going? Are the major questions everyone asks. When I wrote Awakening, because of my therapeutic, I'm a therapist, a counselor and hypnotherapist, and my whole idea has always been I'm a therapist before I'm a researcher. So when someone comes to me, I'm looking at how best to help them through their experience and the integration of that experience so that they can, normalize it as much as possible and get on with their lives. That was why I wrote the Awakening, which was really to answer many of the questions that so many ask, why me? What's it all about? What do I do about the fear? How do I know this is real? All those kinds of questions that come up time and time again. And so, because I realize so many people are isolated, they've got nowhere to go, they're afraid of going to professionals in case they're put in the loony bin or put in that box that says there's something wrong with you, you need medication. It was a way of helping them through the process. What I discovered, though, and I wrote a little bit about it in Awakening, was the fact that this is intergenerational, that each generation seems to produce what I call upgrades. a difference in the awareness after contact. And that's been obvious all along, is that what it does, it seems to activate people into more awareness of their multidimensional nature. In other words, they start to see more, experience more after their contacts, whether or not it's they start to see energy fields around people. They may see, start to see spirits. They may seem to, be aware of healing abilities and frequencies. And some of them produce scripts or languages, which we call the light languages or star languages, or do strange, unusual drawings and this kind of thing. This intrigued me. So, when people say, where is the evidence that this is happening? The evidence is how people change after their experiences. The evidence is transformation. And I've always been aware of that almost from the beginning of my research, that it was the shift in consciousness that was going on. After 20 years of research into this, I have been left with absolutely no doubt at all that this is very much part of what is going on with this, is this shift in consciousness that changes the whole perspective, the way they see things, they understand things. Often they take up more holistic lifestyles. They want to live often more simple lifestyles. They turn away from materialism. They often change their diet. Many of them want to go into healing. There's a whole range of things that change the way that they want to see their reality and their world. And this, for me, was extremely profound. So the next book, The New Human, was really focusing on that bigger picture of, because everyone wants to know, what's this about? What is the agenda or agendas of these non-human intelligences? And the media and often the old school of ufology is focused primarily on the trauma, looking at the nuts and bolts, which is the marks on the body after contact, implants, the sighting of craft, have you got photographs? What I call very much the 3D side of understanding or saying this is real. But also what went with that was often the focus on the trauma, the fear, these beings and their negative agendas and what have you. And what I really wanted to do was find out, was that true? Or was there in fact something different? And more individuals were coming to me through these 20 years of working with 3,000 individuals. And what I was discovering was that only about 20 to 25% seemed to be highly traumatized. And some of them, once they understood their experiences, would actually shift from that. But not only that, there were many that were having a more gentle, more subtle type of experience where they'd always felt different. They'd always known in a way that they'd come with a mission or a purpose. They'd always felt like that they could see and experience things on a level other people couldn't. Many felt almost like they'd been adopted in their own family because they felt so different. Many of them were clairvoyant and clairaudient, were able to see things, from the woe to go, really. Some being aware they'd been taken up on craft, but it wasn't negative for them. It was connecting with what they would think was or feel that was their star family, learning things on the craft, having healing procedures on the craft, all the kinds of things that were not really being brought into the whole field of ufology. But I was seeing, calling themselves star seeds or star, and their children being star kids, the children talking about their experiences of going up on craft, being taught things on the craft, feeling very comfortable with it, particularly the children. So my book, The New Human, is really about what I was discovering and what I've been discovering with that broader brush, if you like, which is, taking it a little out of ufology and saying that this is so much broader than the nuts and bolts way that we've been looking at this for the last 60 or 70 or 80 years, that there's something else happening here. And it's broader than that narrow way of experiencing it. It's looking at the shift in consciousness. And people need to also understand that it's not necessarily just through seeing a UFO or being taken up on craft that people are shifting in consciousness. That somebody who's had a near-death experience, we've found through our research with the Organization of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, free of one. I'm one of the co-founders and directors. What we have discovered through these surveys that we've done, 600 questions of about their experiences, and over 3,000 individuals. What we're discovering is that there is, without question, what you can communication with non-human intelligences doesn't have to be through having an interaction on a spacecraft. It can be through having a near-death experience where your consciousness is shifted enough for you to start having communication with spirits or non-human intelligences. It could happen through a shamanic experience where you are shifted in consciousness and start to have communication. It can happen through a meditation or some other spiritual practice. So what it's really saying is that this is about consciousness. This is not necessarily, this isn't just about being visited by extraterrestrials or interdimensionals or hyperdimensionals or transdimensionals or visitors from our future. What it's saying is as we shift in consciousness, we are then able to connect with those other realms, those other dimensions where spirits, ETs, interdimensionals, and all of them are part of that matrix, if you like, or that hologram. And when you have that shift in consciousnness through one of these, through spiritual practices or through even things like ayahuasca, you shift your awareness to a point where you can communicate then with these beings. So that's really now the focus of the New Human. It's saying the many ways that this can happen is not necessarily through extraterrestrial intervention as such. It can be through your own shift in awareness where you then can tap into, seeing spirits and talking to spirits or talking to these non-human intelligences, which some are into extraterrestrial and physical and some are not. Some are energy or energetic or light beings of consciousness, for example. So I've covered a lot of ground here, but what I'm showing is that how I evolved from going from, awakening to your experience to actually understanding what is actually going on. And this is so much bigger than ufological paradigm. It's actually going into the whole realm of consciousness itself, which means that many of us are experiencers, but we're experiencers through another strategy, if you like, another catalyst, which may be near-death experiences or a shamanic one, etc., etc. So I hope that's sort of given you a bit of an idea of how it's evolved.
Most definitely. I would like to go back just a little bit to the third-party concept of the non-human entity experiences that people are having, and the fact that your research has spanned over 2 decades begs the question if you've seen any shift in reality or in the interactions between experiencers that now have children, and if those children are then affected by the experiences of their parents.
What I've discovered is because it's intergenerational and each generation seems to be an upgrade, is there's no doubt that it's the genetics, if you like, and the soul contract in a way that their children are going to be experiencers. So because, I ended up working with families with children and the parents have had various forms of encounters. Sometimes they've been very scared. Sometimes they've been actually quite okay with it. The child then comes out and says they're seeing things. And that can be very, very confronting for some parents. Other parents have dealt with it really well. But what is fascinating and why 9 chapters of, the New Human is focused on families and the children is because the children seem to be far more comfortable on the whole than their parents with all of this. They seem to be very aware not only of their encounters, but their connection to them. They'll talk about, and this is all conscious recall. These are children under the age of 10 that I'm talking about a lot of the time, is that they have conscious recall without hypnosis. That is that they come from another planet. They have incarnated into human form. They've got skills that they have brought with them, which is part of their mission of why they've come here. they described some of those skills. I mean, one little 8-year-old telling me that she not only was, it was quite interesting, she'd had an experience a few days before and said she wanted to speak to me because I'd actually previously spoken to her mother. And she said to me that she'd been taken to a planet where she was being shown how to levitate, shown how to use her third eye and her psychic abilities. And with that, one of her skills was that she could actually manipulate elements. What she meant by that was the wind and clouds, and that she could actually manipulate those through her awareness, for example. And this sounds quite extraordinary for an 8-year-old to explain that to you. But she wanted to explain. She'd also talked about genetic engineering, and that the beings were showing her how they did genetic engineering between species, between also animal species and plant species. And all of this complex information is being shown her as an 8-year-old. And she's quite comfortable with it. This is her hardest problem, as she explained to me, was, not being able to talk about this generally with other people, because she knew, because I said, can you speak about this in other places? She said, absolutely not. She even explained about her, and she called them her fairies, actually were often in the classroom with her when she was learning things in school. And sometimes when information was inaccurate or she needed to be told the truth about something, her fairies would contradict the teacher and actually say, well, that's not accurate. This is accurate, or whatever. So, I mean, and she's not the only 8-year-old telling me this. I had another 8-year-old in the US saying to me that a little grey being in the classroom would be telling her the truth about things when she was being told things that were inaccurate at school. So these kids are comfortable with this. They're comfortable with being taken on spacecraft. They get taken and get shown the moon and Mars. What's on the moon? What's on Mars? They get told and educated in complex subjects. And for them, this is their reality. So for them, it's, if mum and dad are okay with it, that is the bottom line. And they often, the parents will say to me, what do I make of this? Where do I go with this? And primarily it's just listen. Listen to what your child is telling you, because they need to be heard and they need to know that this is okay and there's not something wrong with them. And the biggest thing for me, and the most powerful, has been when I was speaking to an 8-year-old in my office a few years ago, and he started to tell me about the mantis beings who he feels connected to, who he goes and sees on the spacecraft. And afterwards he said to me, and this is what, your audience and listeners need to hear, is he said to me, so you don't think I'm crazy. And when you've got an 8-year-old questioning their sanity, then we have to be really careful here, because this is where we're going as a species. And these are not unusual kids. These are right across the planet. And this is why, when I wrote The New Human, I made a really important point here of saying, listen to the children, because this is what the children have said to me, that most of the time, it's dismissed, or, unless they've got aware parents, the parents don't know what to make of it. And so the kid gets confused. And this is really, if anything, it's really important to realize that this is what's going on now. And I get emails from all over the planet, from Turkey, from Europe, from Africa, and from, South America, telling me about the children and what they're saying and what they feel they can do.
So, from your experience, would it be fair to say that when you have a child that has been chosen to share this information, is it I understand that it can be multi-generational, but it seems like there's more and more negatively labeled experiences for children now than there have been in the past for things like Asperger's, children on the autistic spectrum, and things like that could actually be explained as being part of a more evolved generation, so that, what we're seeing in America, where everybody is on some kind of medication to keep them within this devolved state, versus what you see in Europe, where you don't have a whole bunch of kids on medication. Do you think that it's an overall generational experience of evolution, or are there more likely to be children that have been chosen based on their familial experiences because they're going to be more open and therefore able to help the rest of us kind of move forward?
It's probably Shauna, it's probably a combination of both. What surprised me was when I first got the clue that there were new programs going on this planet, and a lot of the time these new programs in our children were interpreted as dysfunctional. There were things, there's either some genetic fault or some kind of dysfunction in the individual. Well, I knew no better at one point. What intrigued me, and it's like as you do research, you start to look at patterns and you start to ask questions, always asking questions, what is this? When I was talking to experiencers, adults that had children, and if the theory was a hypothesis that each generation was an upgrade, why was it then that some families who were experiencers had autistic children, or had children with Asperger's, or had children with ADHD, for example, or whatever? So if we're having upgrades, how is it that we're having these children that appear to have dysfunctions? And the metaphysicians, people in the metaphysical and spiritual field, were seeing these differences and giving them different names, like crystal children, indigo children, children of light, all these different names and what have you, explaining behaviors of these children and saying that they were different and what have you. Never quite putting together that it might be part of an extraterrestrial component, which is really where, I bring that in the new human, and saying it's actually bigger. It's not just the fact that the soul is coming in with a new mission and whatever. These appear to be new qualities of humans. So to us, we see them as dysfunctional. For example, with ADHD, for example, that's considered a dysfunction. But what actually I've discovered is that, and in fact, the clue was talking initially to a gentleman who'd had ADHD all his life and never realized it till he was in his 50s. And he said to me when I was over in Hong Kong, Mary, I've always seen reality differently, and I've always seen it in a far more complex way. And there are little clues like that to say, okay, so if you're seeing reality differently, is this a good thing or not a good thing? And what I've discovered is that the ADHD, for example, I'll quote a little bit from a molecular biologist who gave me this statement about 7 or 8 years ago. And he said this: the exponential increase in autistic, ADHD, and indigo children is they have a new genetic architecture which allows them to see the world in a multidimensional fashion. And he believed that research would show dormant genetic regions are being reintegrated into the biological systems occurring in all of us to produce expanded awareness. Their brains work faster, they have access to more information in the beginning. In the classroom, learning is much faster. And he said, I believe they even know what's being taught. So what we saw or has been interpreted as a dysfunction is, in fact, I believe, us being shifted into a more multidimensional awareness and taking us out of the limited 3D reality we are all so programmed into that we find it even hard to honor the fact people can be clairvoyant, clairaudient, or intuitive, because that's not real, is it? Is the way the mainstream wants to go. But what they are is they are the if you like, an upgrade. One of the ways that Neil Gold understood his ADHD is he reinterprets ADHD as always dialed into higher dimensions. So what I was seeing was, once I had got that clue, is, okay, so what is it that they're experiencing that we're not aware of, and why they're behaving in a certain way? When I spoke to an Asperger's once, the clue was there. He said, Mary, he said, we in Asperger's, we're told we can't socialize because we can't, because that's a problem with us. He said, no, he said, it's not that at all. We can socialize with one another quite comfortably. We can't socialize with people who have masks, that don't say the truth, because Asperger's need you to be totally honest and truthful. And that's part of their gift, is that they don't put on masks. They say things as they are. They're highly intelligent. A lot of the autism that we're seeing, the ones that are born with autism, many of them are telepathic, and there's been research to show that they're telepathic, many of them. So a lot of the reason they struggle is that they're picking up from those around them a lot of information that you're not aware of. And when they react in certain ways, they're reacting to the emotions and what they're picking up from other people around them. So if you can imagine that you're getting input, huge amounts of input from all around you, just imagine how you can struggle with that, and try and make sense of it when you're expected to see the world through a little tiny, one eye, when in fact you're seeing the world through two. And the same goes with dyslexia. I think these are not dysfunctions. And another molecular biologist, believe it or not, actually says exactly the same thing as that. And the way that, and this is something that she's saying is to her, how she explains it. And this is Dr. Lena Olson, who's also in my book. And I talk about all these new programs and a holistic way of looking at them. I found it fascinating that many teachers that are writing to me are agreeing with me and saying they know about these new kids because they've had experiences and they can actually see them energetically in the classroom. They say, I had the same experiences where I struggled with mainstream 3D programming and what have you. And so there are these teachers that are aware of it, that are that want to bring in new curriculums for these children because they understand the difference. And one of the things that Dr. Olson said, and she's a molecular biologist, she said, it's not so simple as different DNA. She said it's a combination of genetically improved bodies in a combination of souls from different places in our universe incarnating in improved bodies. The souls have different frequencies and vibrations depending on their evolutionary status, and that plays a part in activation of the DNA. So what she's really saying is that we are evolving on multi-levels here, and this is what we're seeing as the new program. So my book really is a way of showing that the evidence is there from those that are aware enough, like the teachers some of the more aware teachers that are coming in that are noticing it, those that are working with autistic children that are starseeds themselves that can see this in the children. And so it's not just from one level here. I'm actually getting feedback from professionals that are actually seeing this. I've even spoke to midwives that have said to me they know that they have come, bringing in the new starseeds. They're aware that a lot of these children that they're helping to be born are actually starseeds. I'm getting it in education where the teachers are telling me this. I'm getting clinical psychologists that are starseeds saying they're seeing it in the children. And their problem is with 3D reality and the reality dysfunction that we have on this planet, that unless you can touch it, feel it, see it, smell it, and whatever, it ain't real. When in fact, we're all becoming aware that we live in a multidimensional reality that is in fact just as real. And the problem is getting mainstream to acknowledge that this is a reality dysfunction that we're living in, and we really need a new model of reality. And I hope that makes sense to you, because I'm covering a lot of ground here.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. I think that where we're at right now is very confined, and there are more and more people every day that are waking up to the reality of holographic universe and multidimensional reality. So now would probably be a really good time to go ahead and take a break so that our listeners have an opportunity to kind of digest the information that we've shared thus far. We will return to our conversation with Miss Mary Rodwell in just a moment. Stay tuned.
charred remains. Mortar shells, red, red rain. Mogadishu, don't forget. Angels' blood was being let, bringing comfort and supplies to emaciated sunken eyes. Is this the end of the beginning, or the beginning of the end? Is this the end of the beginning? I'll ask you this, my friend. Yugoslav genocide, so much anger from inside. Ethnic difference causes pain, flashing in each other's brains. Communism, it concedes to death and violence in the streets. Like the Chinese prophet said, the yellow river flowing red. Is this the end of the beginning, or the beginning of the end? Is this the end of the beginning? I'll ask you this, my friend. Is this the end of the beginning, or beginning of the end? Is this the end of the beginning? I'll ask you, my friend. Is this the end of the beginning, or beginning of the end? The end of the beginning, or beginning of the end? Is this the end of the beginning, or the beginning of the end? Is this the end of the beginning? I'll ask you this, my friend. Is this the end of the beginning, or beginning of the end? Is this the end of the beginning? I'll ask you, my friend. The end of the beginning, or beginning of the end? Is this the end of the beginning? I'll ask you again. Is this the end of the beginning, or the beginning of the end? Is this the end of the beginning? I'll ask you this, my friend.
And welcome back to this THA conversation. My name is Shauna Collins, and I am co-hosting today with Miss Stephanie James as we discuss the new human and awakening evolution of humanity with Mary Rodwell. Now, Mary, I think now is a really great time to really start to see more work like your book, where evidence is provided in a tangible, kind of quantifiable way, because there are going to be skeptics out there that need those kind of proofs from the biological level, from the psychological. And I'd like to ask Stephanie if she wants to jump in here, if there was anything that really got to you and something that you wanted to expound on.
Well, yeah, actually, I was actually quite curious. You were speaking about your client, that found out that he was ADHD at 50 years old, and, that he described himself as, sort of being highly sensitive, really, and actually experiencing life in a more detailed way. And being somebody who would consider themselves to have ADD or ADHD myself, I can completely relate to that. I think that we're highly sensitive people. But actually, I have to discuss it ever so slightly on an astrological level, because I know that some of your work, you talk about those in the star seeds and the crystal children, and there was a series of astrological events which coincided with these indigo children sort of appearing on the planet. And one of these events was the 1988 to 1989 super conjunction in Capricorn. And then to follow that, we had a conjunction of Uranus and Neptune in 1993 in Capricorn, which happens only every 170 to 172 years. And these kind of things that happen are so rare that they are going to create very unique people when they do happen. And so this is a very unique generation that was being crafted. And I recently read in the newspaper about this generation now of young people who are actually old enough to go out and get work, who have autism and Asperger's, who have actually found a real niche in creating films and working on animation and design for things like Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks. And it got me thinking about how we're talking about this kind of extra dimension that none of us can really, the layman struggles to find tangible, yet the people who have been, these people with Asperger's and autism and ADD who struggle to focus on a task, but seem to be able to apply themselves so well creatively and can work on creating such elaborate and beautiful films that people can fully immerse themselves in and experience almost another dimension just sitting in their own home. I wonder if you've got any kind of opinion or perspective on whether or not they're actually bringing the dimension to us, or how you feel that technology and the things that these indigos or these people are so good at manipulating, whether you think that they're actually creating another realm for us to experience.
It's a very good question, Stephanie, and I think absolutely. One of the interesting things with Neil, he's written a book called Close Encounters of the ADHD Kind. And I've got a slide that actually is the way that he said in his book, where he talks about meeting the beings of light, for example. But he said, being symptomatic of ADHD, I'm not limited to the square template of the universe. I'm wired to the multidimensional universe. My internet browser can browse into chaos, be it on Earth or the multiverse. I can perceive hidden layers of order and make sense of it all. Most folk without a supercharged browser cannot do this. They're focused towards convention in this reality. So he's always been, in a way, able to conceptualize, more of the hologram, as it were. And I think you're quite right. I think they're coming in to assist with this evolutionary shift in consciousness through their abilities. And having said that, one of the other ways they're doing it is there's in my book, I've got a chapter on a young man who's an artist. And he said to me, his artwork, he knows that he talked about coming from another dimension. He's come in and he said, my artwork actually shifts perceptions. So when people look at it, they don't realize it, but it's actually shifting them, shifting their awareness without them actually being conscious of that's actually happening. Another way it's happening is through frequency in music. A lot of these new upgrades of human, if you like, are bringing in music creatively that has the frequencies that they're coming in with, which is shifting consciousness as well. And to give you an example of that, and I think it's chapter 7, I'm writing about a young 11-year-old in Australia whose mother wrote to me and said that he actually plays on the piano certain songs that come through him from the beings. And one of them, he's learning the piano, and he knows the difference between the normal way he plays, where he gets tired after a few minutes, and when this energy comes in, and he knows the names of the energy. He'll tell his mum to film it and record it. And he some of the songs are called, one of them is called Decoding DNA. And he plays for 12 minutes non-stop with the frequencies. And his understanding is decoding DNA tells you something, doesn't it? The very name from an 11-year-old. So, the frequencies are coming in, I think, through the music of these new children. Also, as you say, through the perception of how they're perceiving things, because all of this is triggering the rest of us. It's, the older models, as I call it, like myself. What it's doing is it's actually helping to upgrade us. And on top of that, we've got those older generations that are being activated and have been over the last few years. And 2012, everybody expected lots of things to happen. Well, there was things happening, but it was on a far more subtle level. Many of the adults that I've spoken to that were going quite comfortably in their 3D world would have an experience or be activated in the last few years and have gone from, being, a conventional lawyer or a psychologist or a nurse or whatever into suddenly being aware and awake. And one of the most profound stories that I've written about in The New Human is a medical doctor who got activated a few years ago in India. And going from a medical doctor now, she works as a shamanic healer working on the DNA. And she actually has people come to her and she activates them. She also works on levels of where old programs have got in the way of them being activated. So she clears those as well. Now, you've got someone who's come in from the medical profession that is, through her activation now is doing, if you like, a multidimensional type of healing. So this is incredible shifts that we're talking about. We're not just talking about little things here and there. We're talking about major shifts in lifestyle, in awareness, in understanding that's happened. And I think the new kids coming in, and they often do pick, as you talked about, these important astrological dates. Part of that is, the bringing in the right environment for these souls that are coming from across the cosmos and coming in with their awareness so they can actually help with that shift in consciousness on this planet.
Yeah, it's fascinating, actually. And you speaking about your the doctor, actually, who was working as a medical doctor and then switched over to being sort of a shaman and sort of waking people up and sort of bringing them into consciousness. I wondered, just out of curiosity, she would have been previously prescribing drugs for conditions that actually she would have seen as perhaps some of the ones that we've discussed today. How damaging do you think that drugs are to people going through these experiences? Do you think that they're a complete blockage, or is there a need for them in some way to introduce people slightly into this shift?
Oh, that's a very explosive question, that one, Stephanie. As an ex-nurse midwife...
Sorry about that.
Look, as an ex-nurse midwife, I know what I would have said 40 years ago or, whenever I was in the medical profession. I've got a completely different perspective on this now. Look, I'm not saying that all medications are bad. What I am saying is that I know that they are being misused, and a lot of the medications out there now, I believe, do more harm than good often as not, because what happens is that they suppress one symptom but just create other symptoms. And unfortunately, if we get into the conspiratorial side, I believe some of that is deliberate. What I do know is that there are lots of... My daughter's a naturopath, and she works with, homeopathy and acupuncture and herbs. And I believe that many of the natural remedies out there are being suppressed or not being allowed to be used that will not have the damaging effects of many of these drugs that are being used now. I definitely feel there is a program to suppress awareness from a high level. I don't think the average doctor is aware of it. I don't think, the average professional is aware of it, but I think those that that own these corporations and drug companies are fully aware of some of the damage a lot of these drugs, and they're not actually being, that it's all in concert with one another. Unfortunately, this seems to be more and more obvious, and any of the doctors that suss this out are often having a really hard time. I think that's the problem, is that the average GP on the street isn't aware that all the tests that he's told that is done, or the protocols that are supposedly put in place. So my problem with it is that I do know that a lot of the more natural ones are being suppressed, and we're getting a lot of these other drugs that are very toxic. I am absolutely horrified that children 3, 4, 5, 6 are diagnosed with ADHD and stuck on Ritalin and other things. And I do think that that's an agenda. That's agenda to shut down these amazing new humans that we're having on the planet. In my book, I have got information on how best to support those higher awareness children, the ADHDs. And, there are certain types of vitamins, there are certain things that you can give, minerals that they need because they operate faster, where you can stabilize them. And diet is really important for them as well because they're hypersensitive. And there's information in my book from a lady who is a scientist, a molecular biologist, Dr. Lena Olson, who herself is one of the letter people, she calls it, which is Asperger's, stroke autism, stroke ADHD. And she has stabilized herself and her family through these protocols because she understands as a scientist as well as, an experiencer, because she's had interactions with many different types of beings as well. So she's bringing in both those sides. And there are ways of treating and helping these aware kids. And it's not with drugs. These drugs, I believe, are, my understanding is that suppression does nothing to help them. What it does is slow them all down for sure. It enables them to be programmed into 3D. But what we're seeing and what I'm seeing is that 3D is not unnatural, isn't where we need to be. Ultimately, we have got the ability to, all of us, to be multidimensional and to tap into our multidimensional natures really is where we are heading. In other words, what Dr. Olson talks about is low frequency people and high frequency people, and we're separating out into those two frequencies now. And some are going to choose 3D, some are going to choose to be more aware and more awake. And what's fascinating to me, and always has been, why is it that 95% of our DNA, we don't know what it does? That it was considered dormant. That's got to tell you something. What we're seeing, I believe, and certainly I suspect, is that we are that dormant DNA is being activated, and the evidence is these new children. They're having other parts of themselves being activated. We don't understand it in mainstream, so we think there's something wrong with them. And so they're given all these medications. I think a lot of the medications, all I would say is look at the side effects, guys, before you go too heavily into medications. Look at the side effects and weigh it up. And there are a lot of natural remedies now out there that you can take that won't perhaps have the same damaging effect and what have you. I have to be very careful here. All I would say to people is be informed before you take your collection of tablets and pills. And some of them certainly are important for certain conditions because we've got no other way of dealing with them yet. But be very careful. Look at the side effects and be aware of what you're doing to your body.
Absolutely, and I wouldn't want to recommend that anybody came off any kind of medication. It's something that they should seriously consider before, and like you said, inform themselves first before doing anything like that, because that's quite a big thing, especially if you've been on medication for a long time. So yeah, absolutely. Sorry to put you in the hot water there and make you think on your feet a little bit. That was quite a loaded question, but I still feel it was relevant because I think. With the kind of people that are affected by these issues and the amount of labels that these people are getting, I suppose that people would be wondering, am I supposed to be taking tablets or not? And there are so many great ways of managing medical issues now, natural ways, and with over-the-counter medication and prescribed medication as well. So it's like you said, being informed is very important.
Yes. All I can say is yes. I think the important thing with all of this is the internet is a very valuable tool. And obviously there's a lot of stuff on the internet that is a worry, but also with that, there's a lot of really valuable information about, the whole range of, in terms of understanding. And, it really is about, I think the task for many of us now is to start to work out what resonates with us, what actually makes sense to us, rather than being, going by the traditional ways of just taking your doctor's advice or just taking your teacher's advice or the local MP or whatever, and realizing that a lot of the time there are agendas behind their messages, and you need to see what the agendas are and whether or not that still fits for you when you work it out. Because there are, I mean, I recall this 9-year-old talking to me from Northern Europe through an interpreter, and she was talking about even our education, and she said many of the star seeds being born on the planet, and she reckons that at least 50% of the planet are star seeds. She said the teachers program you out of your light, is the way she described it, and they then just press the keys. And I do think that this is a deliberate way of keeping us in an old paradigm that is actually not true to who we are, that we have a multidimensional awareness that's being shut down and being programmed out of us. And what these new programs are of children is to actually shift consciousness into us realizing that we live in this reality dysfunction, and it's time now to own that we are multidimensional and that we have to look at things from all those levels rather than just the one that we all have been taught is the only reality. And many of those in psychiatric hospitals shouldn't be there. This is what disturbs me when I've met so many that have been medicated, that have being told. One is in Awakening, I write about in my chapter 4 a beautiful young lady who contacted me when she was 19, and she'd been in a psychiatric hospital for a number of years, and it was when she was 14 she told the doctor she was seeing aliens, and he said there was no such thing. And she ended up being diagnosed as schizophrenic and being given a cocktail of medications that actually several times she tried to commit suicide. And it wasn't until she was 19 and she saw a talk program, I think, in the US, where people were talking about these experiences. She started to question the diagnosis and finally contacted me and said, I don't think I'm crazy. And from that time, her mother was a nurse and who checked me out to see whether I was a crazy woman that her daughter wanted to speak to, and realized that, I'd been a trained counselor and worked at a credible agency in Perth. And from that, we actually became very good friends. I got invited to her 21st birthday party. But the bottom line was that she is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many in psychiatric hospitals or being medicated because they have clairvoyant experiences or clairaudient experiences or ET encounters, or they're seeing a broader spectrum of reality. And because it's not being acknowledged or understood by mainstream professionals, if you like, it's seen as a dysfunction. It's seen as something to fix with medication or to shut down with medication, instead of us actually looking at this and saying, is this person really unwell? Or is it they're just having an experience that they're trying to understand and trying to make sense of? And how can we help them understand what may be going on for them? I mean, many psychics, mediums, clairvoyants that know that they're having these experiences and coming to me and saying, is it, am I okay? Or how can I understand this? And it's just a matter of giving them tools to understand that when you shift into that awareness, you're not going crazy, but you are perceiving more. So let's see how you can work with that so that you can integrate it into a way that, you are grounded and you can function on 3D, but also multidimensionally without, feeling like there's something wrong with you, that you can utilize that. Many people get intuition. Many people get a knowing or a sensing or feel that they're guided in some way. That is useful. That's not a dysfunction. That is useful. So how then can you work with that so that you are comfortable with it and you can trust it? And that's all they need, often as not, is a way of managing it so that, and in Awakening, I've got a whole chapter on if you're experiencing this or you're experiencing that, this is how you can work with it so that you can understand it. That's not to say that some people do find that it becomes so overwhelming that can make them feel like they're out of control. But again, with help, they can often get some balance with that.
Absolutely. I do. I find it quite funny, actually, to think that, the control structure, I don't want to get conspiratorial about it, but, the people that I mean,
Get
let's do it.
conspiratorial.
Well, obviously, if there's people in charge and they're making an awful lot of money out of people being unwell and keeping people on medication, then it's in their best interest to keep people dumbed down, especially the ones who are breaking out the boundaries of this reality and actually pushing us into evolution. So, if they're making enough money out of how things are at the moment, why would they want us to grow into something that could outgrow them and our need for them? So, I think it's a shame. It's a real shame to think that there's people like that young girl you were speaking about who has been sitting in a psychiatric hospital for years and years because of something that she said to her doctor when she was 14 years old. That's just, the brain is still young and growing, and putting that amount of drugs into somebody at that age is just so damaging to them.
It's conspiratorial, whether people want to see that you're conspiratorial, or, conspiracy theory. It's not a theory. This has now been, there have been many of those within the professions that have seen what's going on and have tried to, alert the public on, and some of them have not survived doing it. That goes with a lot of different things, from everything to do with the fluoride in the water right through to what is being understood about some of these, vaccinations that are these complex types of vaccinations. There is a lot the public is not being informed about, that they need to be informed about. And certainly we do know and whether people want to look into this for themselves, and this is what is really important, and why I talk like this. I'm saying, don't believe me. Go and have a look at some of what, the agendas behind pushing pills down people's faces, because, the drug companies are making billions of dollars out of people's out of the programs that they've orchestrated through many of the doctors, who don't always realize that some of these medications are far more dangerous than there's enough come out in some of the documentaries and some of these other programs that they've pushed a particular pill or a drug, and afterwards it's been discovered it's created even worse problems within the individual, psychosis to all sorts of things. All I say is, if you're taking any kind of medications, at least be informed about what it's doing to your body. Don't just necessarily take the doctor's word for it, because the doctor only knows so much as well. I think a lot of them are quite innocent of, not knowing that they're advised this is a good one, it works, from the drug company, et cetera, and they can't do all the testing to check it out. They can only see whether or not it has an effect or not on someone. But some of these literally are seem to have, they'll suppress one aspect of the condition, but will create a whole host of other ones. And this, I'm an ex-nurse midwife. I've looked at this from both angles. And all I can say is, I know there have been a lot of drugs out there that ultimately have caused more harm than good. And, there is options, and people need to look and see whether or not an option would be preferable to some of these things. So I think it's very important that you said that, Stephanie, because I agree with you. I think now it's become about money. It's not become about health. It's become about keeping us unhealthy so that we can actually support the drug companies that are making absolutely trillions of dollars. I wouldn't even like to think of it, because it's far, if they can get everyone on one or two tablets across the planet, they're laughing, aren't they? And that's the bottom line. It's become about money, and it's become about power, and it's become about control. And I really think that people, thankfully, are waking up to that now, and they're realizing that. And I think we have to, because it's us and it's our future we're talking about, and our children, the new generations.
I think I saw something online somewhere that said the pharmaceutical industry doesn't create cures, it creates customers. And as long as there's a profit to be made from illness, they will never create cures. They're just going to create other things that make you ill. So, unfortunately,
I agree. I absolutely, I have to say that I agree with you, and it's part of the reason that I do a lot of these interviews and what have you. I'm hoping that information, which is what you're doing, both of you, which is brilliant, is you're providing information that gets people thinking. People don't have to believe it all, I don't ask them to, when I do presentations, I'm not asking people to believe everything that I'm putting out there. What I'm asking them to do is anything is interesting to them or it resonates with them to start exploring for themselves, because they'll find their own answers and they'll know what feels right and what doesn't feel right, and not to blindly just believe everything they see on the television or they hear, from wherever, to actually explore it for themselves, because there is, layers of truth here, and there's an awful lot that isn't true that you're being told by mainstream for lots of different agendas. I mean, we all laugh and say politicians, how do you know they're lying? Well, when they open their mouths. We're all pretty aware of where the politicians are at. But, they're only puppets a lot of the time from the corporations and drug companies and whatever that are actually pulling the strings. And anyone who hasn't worked that one out yet really needs to start looking into it, because you don't need to be a brain surgeon to work out how things work on this planet. It's in your face, just start seeing, allow yourself to see beneath the surface, and it really isn't hard.
Okay, well, this is Paul back at Ground Zero. We did have a few technical issues with that first show from Stephanie and Shana there, as Shana's juggling with some new software. So just a couple glitches and a bit of missing audio where they asked Mary how you guys can get hold of her and what she's up to as they were about to close the show off. And here's what she said.
Well, apart from a Facebook, I have got two websites. One is maryrodwell.com.au, but the other one is ACERN, which is the Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, which is acern.com.au. And both of them have different types of information. And people can also contact me through those websites and also on my Facebook. But I also would encourage people, if they have had experiences, to fill in an anonymous survey that we're doing with this new research with free that I mentioned, and that is a website called experiencer.org. And we have on our board of directors, most of them are PhDs in either astrophysics, physics, and then we've got a neuroscientist, Dr. Bob Davis. We've got a professor of psychology, Dr. Don Climo. What we're doing is creating now a whole new understanding through our surveys. And there's 3,000 individuals so far, and several different languages that are showing us that what really is going on with this experience. So I urge people to go to that website as well.
And that was Mary Rodwell with Stephanie and Shana. Apologies for some of the teething problems we had there with technical. But yes, we've got some very interesting people in the pipeline. So don't forget to tune back in here. And we'll also be having very shortly part 2 of Stephanie and Shana speaking with Mary Rodwell. Until the next time, take care, be strong, be brave, and keep tuning into THA Talks. Bye.